Follow us to stay updated on debates, discussions, facts, and tips about health. Click on the subscribe button and the bell icon for latest updates.
Hello viewers, I Dr. Shikha welcome you all to Thip Media's show Health Files, where we'll be discussing the survival story of Miss Jazz Sethi. Jazz Sethi was just 13 years old when she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. She is not just the digital face of type 1 diabetes community in India, but also a performance artist, writer, and director of the Diabesties Foundation. Let's get to know more about her journey of why me slowly and steadily transformed into a lens of what if.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for the invite. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you. So, my first question to you is, in India, there is a lack of awareness about type 1 diabetes. So, based on your experience, would you like to share some insights regarding type 1 diabetes to our viewers?
Thank you so much for that question. And you're absolutely right. There is a lack of awareness, especially in India, all over the world, but more so in India. Diabetes is a very generic word, and moreover, diabetes is considered sugar ki bimari, as you must be aware. But there are actually not just one type of diabetes. There's not two types. There are actually like 7, 8 types of diabetes. The most prominent two are type 1 and type 2. And type 2 diabetes is the one that we talk about more in the general public and in the general media, because it does happen to older people. It is due to different issues and different reasons. It can be reversed with a lot of work, and sometimes you don't need medication. You just have diet and lifestyle changes and it can help. Type 1 diabetes, however, is an autoimmune condition. And what happens in it is that the body mistakenly destroys the insulin-producing beta cells of the pancreas. Now, insulin is a very, very important hormone without which humans cannot survive. What insulin does is that it regulates the glucose we get from the food we eat into energy for our body. So I often give the example to my kids, like, गाड़ी को क्या चाहिए होता है चलने के लिए? It requires petrol. तो हमारे बॉडी का जो पेट्रोल है वो ग्लूकोज होता है. But when the glucose needs to get into the cells to actually work, those cell doors are locked. And insulin is the key that opens up those cell doors, and that's how insulin goes inside. So it's a very, very important hormone. And in type 1 diabetes, we are insulin deficient. हमारे body में insulin बनता ही नहीं है. Type 2 diabetes के body में insulin बनता है, शायद वो कम होता है, or the absorption is not proper. But in type 1 diabetes, our pancreas has shut down, factory is off. So we need to take insulin externally to survive. We need to take it through injections because insulin does not come in a pill format. It's only as an injectable. Multiple times a day, we need to check our sugars constantly. We need to carb count for the meals. We need to take according to what we eat. We need to take that much insulin. Our sugars can go up and down. And that is what type 1 diabetes is. It is mostly juvenile, which means it happens more in kids, but it can happen at any age. And you don't need any family history for it to happen to you. It's an autoimmune condition. And I was diagnosed when I was 13, and I live with type 1 diabetes as well.
That's a wonderful way of putting type 1 diabetes into words. So, coming to my second question, tell us about your experience with dealing with type 1 diabetes.
So, like I said, I was diagnosed when I was 13 years old, and life changed overnight. And, all the symptoms for type 1, and that's again something that all your viewers should know. The symptoms, what we call are the 4 T's: tired, thirsty, thinner, and toilet. और हमने हिंदी में भी वो किया है कि पेशाब पस्त हो जाना, पतला होना, and the idea is that you lose a lot of weight, you get very, very thirsty, you go to the bathroom a lot. And that was happening to me like for a week or 2 weeks. And my parents saw that, and I had lost about 7 kgs in 1 week. And my mom was like, beta, you lost a lot of weight, just go check your weight. And it was 7 kgs lighter. And just like any Indian family, we called up a family doctor, and he said, urine test kara do, blood test kara do. And the results went to him, my doctor, directly. He just called up my father and was like, take her to the hospital immediately. Her sugar is some 900 or some 1000. So I was rushed into the hospital, and of course, they started me on insulin and they started me on all the treatment. And it's very difficult. That first shift to your new reality is very difficult, because life as you knew it doesn't exist anymore. The things you thought you can just open the cupboard and eat doesn't exist anymore. Yes, you can eat anything, but you need to take insulin for it. You need to continuously check your sugars. You need to be in range all the time. And it does take a toll on your body physically and mentally. But at the same time, I think what type 1 diabetes, it's made me stronger. It's made me more resilient. It's made me with this never give up kind of an attitude. And with peer support, with community, with all these supports, I think you can live a very long and healthy life with type 1. But yes, that initial shift, because that question does come, ye mujhe kyun hua? Why me? But in your journey of acceptance, that why me becomes a what if. What if I use my condition to make change? What if I use my condition to inspire others? What if I use my condition to live a very healthy and happy life? And that's how I like to think of my journey as well.
That's lovely to know how you face the journey in a positive way. Not all you can do that. And it's wonderful that you're doing that for other people as well. So, coming to my next question, as we know, you had to deal with the life threatening condition of diabetic ketoacidosis. Could you please elaborate on how you dealt with it?
Yeah, so I think when most of us are diagnosed, if the diagnosis is not done early enough, we get into something called DKA, which, as you said, is diabetic ketoacidosis. And it can be a very life-threatening condition because, like I mentioned in my earlier question, that insulin is not there. So all the sugar that we are eating, the glucose, it's staying in our bloodstream. Abhi bloodstream mein reh raha hai, glucose. So our cells are starved for energy because the glucose is not entering the cells. It's not entering the tissue. So our body needs energy. It's not able to get it. So the body starts breaking down fat for energy because a body still needs energy. So it starts breaking down the fat. When it's doing this, it releases these toxic bodies called ketones. Now, ketones are like acid for your blood. It's toxic. And if it becomes very high, you can pass out, you can go into a coma, or in some cases, even death. And the feeling of DKA, it's such a terrible feeling. Like, you feel tired all the time. You feel very lethargic. You have a very fruity smelling breath because there's so much glucose in your blood. You're constantly in the bathroom. You start getting cramps. You get dehydrated. So it's not a fun feeling at all. I would not hope DKA on anyone, but you need to take immediate action. So if it starts going to a case where you start getting abdominal pains, you start vomiting, you really need to go to the hospital immediately. But certain times, even through my journey, I've got DKA at home a couple of times and I've managed it at home only. You need to really hydrate, have a lot of water, keep pumping in insulin into your body. And you hope that DKA doesn't come back. So DKA, why does it happen? It happens because you've stopped insulin. So that's one of the key metrics that we keep telling our kids also with type 1. It's that never stop your insulin, no matter what. And be vigilant. I think the problem is also a lot of people are not aware that aisi cheez ho sakti hai aapko. So the idea is educate yourself, know the signs of DKA. So in case you ever get it, you know how to deal and you act quickly and promptly. So it doesn't get to that stage jahan aapko hospital jana pade.
Now, talking about your not-for-profit organization, the Diabesties Foundation. So, what was the motive behind it, and how does it benefit people suffering from type 1 diabetes?
So, when I was diagnosed, I was a very curious child. So I used to always go onto YouTube and try to search for type 1 diabetes. And, to my dismay, there were just long, boring lectures on YouTube. And as a 13-year-old, I was really not interested in hearing a 2-hour long lecture. And I kept finding that was a struggle. The second thing was that I never knew another person who had type 1 diabetes, who was my age. And the first time I actually met someone who was type 1 was when I started my organization. But I think those two were the main motivating factors. One, and Diabesties honestly just started as wanting to be a YouTube channel. I said, chalo ek YouTube channel banate hain, which is fun, which is entertaining, which is colorful, so that kids who are actually living with the condition can learn about their condition. And then when I started the YouTube channel, we got a lot of engagement, we got a lot of positive response, and we had our first ever dia meet. I said, chalo na phone kar. I called up my doctor. I was like, give me a list of all your patients. I called them up and I made personal phone calls to like 30, 40 people. And I was just like, listen, I also have type 1 diabetes. You also have type 1 diabetes. Let's meet and talk. That's literally how I started. And I was very ready ki wo meeting mein 5 log aayenge. And I was very happy. Chalo 5 log bhi aaye, then I'm happy. But in that first meeting, we had 25 people who came. And that really showed me that community and support is lacking in this country. And that's how Diabesties started. And the journey of Diabesties is, it will be our 5th year now. It's been quite wonderful because we've really expanded into all horizons of type 1 diabetes, right from caregivers to healthcare professionals, to people living with the condition, to our rural segment, to our education programs, to our access programs. And the mission is to make those, all the stakeholders in type 1 diabetes management, to make them feel heard, loved, supported, and celebrated. And that is how the journey has been, and that is how the foundation has also grown. And I think it's going to grow a lot more in the coming years.
Yeah, I definitely believe in that as well. It's a great initiative. So, Jazz, coming to my next question. The Diabesties Foundation predominantly works to provide awareness, advocacy, and access to individuals suffering from type 1 diabetes. How do people from rural areas can communicate or get connected with this initiative?
Yeah, so I think that's a very, very good question, because we do a lot of work even in our outreach capacities to try to reach the unreached. So currently we're supporting around 400 kids from below poverty line segments with insulin, with education, and with access to strips and things like that. The best way to get in touch with us is through our helpline. And we have a 24/7 helpline number that can be reached and accessed. And what we've also done is we've partnered with a lot of general practitioners in the rural segments as well. So if they get a person who is living with type 1 diabetes, who is their patient, they connect them to us as well. So that is how, we've been able to repulate into the rural segments as well. Of course, I feel like we've only touched 20% of rural India, because there's just so much of our population who lives there. But the helpline number would be the best way. And of course, through word of mouth also, it spreads that way as well. Of course, a lot of our communication happens on social media and Instagram and things like that. But for our rural segments, the helpline, we've set up WhatsApp groups, we've set up those kind of small things all over, which they can easily get in touch with us.
Moving forward with this question only, like there is a lack of literacy, like digital literacy in this rural areas. So how do you think you can bridge the gap? Like some doesn't even have the access to mobiles, phones, internet, anything. So how do you make them aware about the organization?
So I think that's always going to be an issue that we need to work. But like I said, we have partnered with a lot of general practitioners. So, GPs who are situated in the rural areas, they sort of know about our foundation. So if they get a patient, they can connect them to us either through a phone call or give them educative material. So we've got a lot of our education material translated into regional languages as well. And we have different educational materials for our rural population and our urban population, because we did a focus group and we found through that our rural kids, they cannot understand clip arts or drawings. They would rather want actual photographs. And for the urban kids, they don't mind the clip art. So we've designed 2 segments of resources also that caters to different kinds of populations, which I think is a good way to bridge in, because we want to give education in the way that people understand it, and not just in a way that looks cool or looks good. If it just looks cool but people can't understand it, then it's pointless. So I think we've really worked hard and we've prototyped it a lot. So it's not just, oh, I think it looks good and I think it works. We've done prototyping. We've given it to focus groups. We've gotten their feedback. We have, taken that feedback into accommodation, and then we move forward with that as well.
So coming to my next question, as we know that you are the first woman in India to get a do-it-yourself artificial pancreas, could you please elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So a DIY APS, what we call, or a do-it-yourself artificial pancreas system, it is not a surgery. So I want to make it very clear, because a lot of talks have given and people have, misconceived it as it's a surgery. There's something inside my body. No, it's none of that. What it is it is actually a technological system where if you are using an insulin pump, a continuous glucose monitor, and your phone, you basically hack into the pump and the CGM. And what you do is you make them talk to each other via a radio frequency device. So I wear an insulin pump for my insulin. I also wear a CGM. So what happens is the pump realizes that when the sugar is going up, it'll give you automatically, it'll give you more insulin. If your sugar is going down, it'll actually suspend the insulin. So it is an artificial technological system wherein your phone, your CGM, and your pump talk to each other, and they make decisions based on algorithms. So they'll make decisions based on your insulin sensitivity factor, your insulin to carb ratio. These are all presets that you add into the system. Then they talk to each other and they work. It's an app on your phone, but the thing is, it's not an app that is FDA approved. That's why it's called DIY. So you need to build your own app. So you have to code that app in. ऐसे नहीं कि आप App Store पे जाके उसको download कर सकते हो. You need to build it, you need to code it, you get all the firmware, you get the softwares, you build it, and then you sort of launch it, and then it does the work. Let's say like normal type 1 diabetic takes 118 extra decisions in a day. इसके साथ you might take 50 extra decisions because वो दूसरे जो 100 decisions है वो आपका phone और आपका system आपके लिए खुद ले रहा है. So if anyone who's hearing who is interested in sort of trying this out, if you're type 1, do get in touch with us. We can definitely guide and help you set it up as well.
Coming to my next question, what is your advice to patients, especially children and their parents, on living with type 1 diabetes?
So then the biggest advice would be to educate yourself, right? Because I believe education is empowerment. The more you know about your condition, the more equipped you will be to deal with the vicissitudes of the condition. And educating yourself from the right sources. So not from Google or not from some ashram or this and that. Educate it from the sources of people who are living with it. And acceptance is also very, very important. And the problem is that we do face denial in the beginning. I faced it too. But the quicker you accept, the healthier you will be. The quicker you accept, the quicker you will start to educate yourself. And the last thing would be, I think, peer support. It's so important to make friends who understand exactly the life that you're living, to make friends who understand what a hypo is, to make friends who understand how it feels like to take an injection. So acceptance, education, and support would be my advice to all the kids, and especially even the parents. The parents also need support. Caregivers need support as much as people living with the condition need support. So I think even for the parents to find people who understand their struggles and their successes, and it becomes a beautiful shared ecosystem of care and support.
In a country like India, several myths and taboo exist around treating type 1 diabetes. How do you think we can overcome these?
You're so right. And in a country like India, because alternative treatments are so prevalent, it becomes very difficult because it's also often the case of so much misinformation. And I oftentimes say that, these people who are spreading this misinformation, they're using vulnerability and hope as clickbait. Because when you're recently diagnosed with the condition, parents are desperate. They are willing to do anything. कि बस insulin भगा दो, हमको cure कर दो, and they're willing to try anything. And rightfully so, they're in a vulnerable position. But then to have avenues that use that vulnerability for personal gain is something I have a very big problem with. The other thing is, in India, we have a very deep culture of ignorance that, we brush it off, or we don't take action against it. So I think the biggest thing would be to call it out, call out the stigma, call out the misinformation, and have a zero tolerance policy against it. Because if you allow it, you are acknowledging it. But if you point it, break it at the root cause, that will sort of give out the message that this is wrong, this is absolutely false, and we shouldn't go for it. The other thing is that, language plays such an important role in the lives of healthcare. And we have a huge movement called Language Matters. It's just the language that you use when talking about diabetes. Like, we don't use word like suffer, or we don't use word like patient. We say people living with diabetes, because language also provokes stigma. And I always say, and I always believe that stigma occurs when you don't know enough, or you know enough of the wrong thing. So there are people till today who come to me and say कि अच्छा तुमने बहुत चीनी खाया था इसलिए तुम्हें diabetes हुआ है. And the only thing you can do is educate, 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 and educate. But I think in terms of the misinformation and myths, to call it out right at that root and not let it spread. And zero tolerance policy for misinformation. Like, it, you take action, and we need to have strong action against people who are claiming things that are just scientifically not possible.
So Jazz, my last question to you is, since peer support and education are supreme in dealing with this condition, how can anyone be associated with the Diabesties Foundation and even attend Dia meets?
Very easy. Just reach out to us on any of our platforms, whether that is Facebook or Instagram. It's Diabesties1 on all our socials. We have our helpline number also over there. Just give us a shout out. Just we post about all our events and all our projects on there. You can go to our website, which is diabesties.foundation, to learn more, to communicate with us, and just show up. You don't even need any kind of a link or registration. Just come, show up, and meet people who are like you and celebrate the Blue Heart Club together.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us, Jazz.
Thank you so much for the invite. It was lovely, lovely talking to you.